Chapter 10. There were a few rough-looking men hanging around the entrance of the Highland Street shelter when Theo parked his bike. He walked through them with a polite "excuse me" and a metallic smile, and he really had no fear because the men wouldn't bother a kid. The foul odor of stale booze hung in the air. "Got any change, kid?" a scratchy voice said. "No, sir," Theo said without slowing down. Inside, down the basement, Theo found Julio and his family finishing dinner. His mother spoke passable English, but it was obvious he was surprised to see Theo on a Wednesday night. Theo explained, in what he thought was perfect Spanish, that Julio needed extra help with his algebra. Evidently, he did not understand perfect Spanish because he asked Julio what Theo was talking about. Then Hector began crying about something, and he got busy with him. The cafeteria was packed and overheated, and there were other crying children. Theo and Julio escaped into a small conference room upstairs, one that his mother sometimes used to see her shelter clients. "Did you talk to your cousin?" Theo asked after he closed the door. "Yes, and he said that he would come, but I don't know. He was very nervous. Theo. Don't be surprised if he doesn't show up." "Okay, let's work on the algebra." "Do we have to?" "Julio, you're making C's. That's not good enough. You should be making B's." After 10 minutes, they were both bored. Theo couldn't concentrate because his mind was on Julio's cousin and the potential bum his testimony would be. Julio was drifting because he hated algebra. Theo's cell phone rang. "It's my mom," he said as he flipped it open. She was leaving the office and was concerned about him. He assured her that he was fine, working diligently with Julio, and would be home from time for Chinese, even though it might be cold Chinese. What difference did it make, hot or cold? After he flipped the phone shut, Julio said, "It's pretty cool that you have a cell phone." "I'm not the only kid in school with a cell phone," Theo said, "and it's only for local calls, no long distance." "Still cool. And it's just a phone, not a computer. No one in my class has a cell phone. You're just a 7th grader. Wait till next year. Where do you suppose your cousin is right now?" "Let's call him." Theo hesitated, then thought, why not? He didn't have all night to spend with the cousin. He punched the numbers, handed the phone to Julio, who listened for a few seconds and said, "Voice call." There was a knock at the door. The cousin was still wearing a khaki work suit with Waverly Creek Golf on bold letters across the back of the shirt and in much smaller letters over the front pocket. His matching cup had the same wording. He wasn't much bigger in size than Theo, and certainly looked younger than 18 or 19. His dark eyes certainly looked younger than 18 or 19. His dark eyes danced around wildly, and before he even sat down, he gave the clear impression that he was ready to leave. He refused to shake hands with Theo and refused to give either his first name or his last. In rapid Spanish, he went back and forth with Julio. The words were tense. "He wants to know why he should trust you," Julio said. Theo was thankful for the interpretation because he had understood almost none of the Spanish. He said, "Look, Julio, how about a quick review? He came to you, you came to me, and now I'm here. I didn't start this process. If he wants to leave, then goodbye. I'll be happy to go home." It was a tough talk, and it sounded pretty strong in English. Julio passed it along in Spanish, and the cousin glared at Theo as if he had been insulted. Theo did not want to leave. He knew he should. He knew better than to get involved. He had been telling himself to butt out, but the truth is that Theo relished being exactly where he was at the moment. Tell him he can trust me and that I will not tell anyone what he said to Julio. Julio passed it along, and the cousin seemed to relax a little. It was obvious to Theo that the cousin was deeply troubled and wanted some help. Julio kept rattling on in Spanish. He was heaping praise upon Theo, who understood some of it. The cousin smiled. Theo had printed a colored Google Earth search map on the creek course, and he had marked the Duffy home. The cousin, still unnamed, began to tell his story. He pointed to a spot in some trees in a dogleg on the sixth fairway, and spoke rapidly about what he had seen. He'd been sitting on some timber near a stream bed, just inside a tree line, eating his lunch, minding his own business, when he saw the man enter the house from the rear door and exit a few minutes later. Julio gamely hung on with his interpretation, often stopping his cousin so he could do the English for Theo. Theo, to his credit, began to understand more and more of the Spanish as he grew accustomed to the cousin's speech patterns. The cousin described the frenzy around the golf course after police showed up and the gossip spread. According to one of his friends, a kid from Honduras who waited tables in the clubhouse grill, Mr. Duffy was having a late lunch and a drink when he got the news that his wife had been found. He made a scene, hustled out, and jumped on his golf cart and raced home. This friend said that Mr. Duffy was wearing a black sweater, tan slacks, and a maroon golf cap. It was a perfect match, said the cousin. The same outfit worn by the men he saw earlier enter the Duffy home and exit just minutes later. From his file, Theo produced 4 paragraphs of Pete Duffy. All 4 had been found online in the archives of the Strattonburg Daily newspaper. He had enlarged them to 8 by 10 inches. He spread them on the table and waited. The cousin could not identify Mr. Duffy. He estimated that he was between 60 to 100 yards away when he was having his quiet lunch and saw the man. The man he had seen looked very similar to the one in the photographs, but the cousin could not be certain. He was certain though of what the man was wearing. A positive identification by the cousin would be helpful, but not crucial. It would be easy to establish how Mr. Duffy was dressed, and the fact that a witness saw a man in the identical clothing enter the home just minutes before the murder would nail a conviction, at least in Theo's opinion. As Theo listened to Julio translate into Spanish, he watched the cousin closely. There was no doubt he was telling the truth. Why would he not tell the truth? He had nothing to gain by lying and plenty to lose. His story was believable, and it perfectly fit into the prosecution's theory of guilt. The problem, though, was that the prosecution had no idea such a witness even existed. Theo listened and again asked himself what he should do next. The cousin was talking even faster, as if the dam had finally broken and he wanted to unload everything. Julio was working even harder to translate. Theo typed feverishly on his laptop, taking as many notes as possible. He stopped the narrative, asked Julio to repeat something, then off they went again. Then, when Theo could think of no more questions, he glanced at his watch and was surprised how late it was. It was after 7 p.m., and his parents would not be happy that he was late for dinner. He said he needed to leave. The cousin asked what would happen next. "I'm not sure," Theo answered. "Give me some time. Let me sleep on it." "But you promised not to tell," Julio said. "I won't tell, Julio. Not until we, the 3 of us, decide on a plan." "If he gets scared, he'll just disappear," Julio said, nodding at his cousin. "He can't get caught, understand?" "Of course I understand." The chicken chow mein was colder than usual, but Theo had little appetite for it. The Boones ate on TV trays in the den. Judge, who had been refused dog food since the first week as a member of the family, ate from his bowl near the television. There was nothing wrong with his appetite. "Why aren't you eating?" his mother said, her chopsticks in midair. "I am eating." "You seem preoccupied," his father said. He used a fork. "Yes, you do," his mother agreed. "Something happened at the shelter?" "No, just thinking about Julio and his family and how difficult it must be for them." "You're such a sweet kid, Teddy." If only you knew, Theo thought. Perry Manson, in black and white, was in the midst of a big trial, and he was on the verge of losing the case. The judge was fed up with him. The jurors looked skeptical. The prosecutor was full of confidence. Suddenly, Perry looked into the crowd of spectators and called the name of a surprise witness. The witness took the stand and began telling a story far different from the one the prosecutor had put forth. The new story made perfect sense. The surprise witness withstood the cross-examination, and the jury found in favor of Perry Manson's client. Another happy ending, another courtroom victory. "Doesn't work that way," Miss Boone said. It was some things he managed to say at least 3 times during every episode. No such thing as a surprise witness. Theo saw an opening, but what if the witness had suddenly appeared? One that was crucial to finding the truth, and one that no one knew about. If no one knew about him, how would he find his way to the courtroom? Mr. Boone asked. "What if he just appeared?" Theo replied. "What if an eyewitness read about the trial in the newspaper or saw something about it on television and came forward? No one knew he existed. No one knew he witnessed a crime. What would the judge do?" It was rare that Theo could stump, even briefly, the 2 other lawyers in the family. His parents thought about this question. A couple of things were certain at this point. 1, both parents would have opinion. 2, there was no way they would agree. His mother went first. "The prosecution cannot use a witness it has not disclosed to court and in defense. The rules prohibit surprise witnesses." "But," his father said, almost interrupting and obviously ready to argue, "if the prosecution doesn't know about a witness, then the prosecution cannot disclose his identity. A trial is all about finding the truth. Denying an eyewitness the chance to testify is the same as hiding the truth. The rules are the rules, but the rules can be modified by a judge when necessary. A conviction could not stand up on an appeal." "I'm not so sure about that." Back and forth, back and forth. Theo grew quiet. He without reminding his parents that neither specialized in criminal law, but such comment could probably draw fire from both. Such discussions were common in the Boone household, and Theo had learned much about the law over dinner, the front porch, even riding down the road in the back seat. For example, he had learned that his parents, as lawyers, were considered to be officers of the court, and as such, they had a duty to aid the administration of justice. If other lawyers violated ethics, or if the police broke the rules, or if the judge got out of line, then his parents were supposed to take appropriate actions. Many lawyers ignored this responsibility, according to his parents, but not them. They was afraid to tell about Julio's cousin. Their sense of duty would probably force them to go straight to Judge Gantry. The cousin would be picked up by the police, dragged into court, forced to testify, then detained as an illegal immigrant. They would put him in jail, and then some of the sort of detention center, where, according to Mr. Mount, he might spend months waiting to get shipped back to El Salvador. Theo's credibility would be ruined. A family would be seriously harmed. But a guilty man would be convicted. Otherwise, Pete Duffy would probably walk out of the court a free man. He would get away with murder. Theo choked down another bite of cold chicken. He knew he would sleep a little. And that's the end of chapter 10.